here to talk about hotspot options, and well, the options part is a little more complicated than it might seem. But, a little bit about me. I'm old, as you can see. I'm a retired software developer. I've been in ham for a long time, varying degrees of activity, and but I've also been involved. I worked in commercial software development, but I've always done a lot with open source software, so that's always been an interest, and that's sort of what got me interested in M17. The combination of all open source and ham radio. I'm definitely a software guy. My hardware experience was all basically an analog stuff a long time ago. I actually worked as a broadcast radio engineer 40-something years ago. So I did wear my analog RF t-shirt here. I don't know if you can see that. You can see it later on. But anyway, I'm going to talk about hotspots. Is everybody here a ham pretty much? And you all know what a hotspot is, not on my phone or a little thing to get internet, but what we mean when we talk about a hotspot. This is sort of what, I asked Claude.ai what ham radio hotspot was, and these are sort of the points it gave me, but I'll skip over that anymore. And so most of the hotspots that we run into in the ham radio thing are MMDVM hotspots, which is MMDVM means multi-mode digital voice modem, and it's really a whole ecosystem of there's hardware designs, firmware that runs on the hardware, and then software that sits on top of that that provides a bunch of functionality. And the multi-mode part is that that supports all these different digital voice modes. There are hotspots and modems. So a hotspot has the RF part built in, whereas a modem can hook up to a separate set of radios, so you can make a repeater with those. Whereas a hotspot, you can't just, or you wouldn't be advised to just amplify the output of a hotspot and use that as a repeater. So it's the other thing about MMDVM, it's an ecosystem. It also is a bit of a monoculture, right? There weren't a whole lot of other options up until very, very recently. I don't know the history of MMDVM very well. There probably are people here who would know more. Were there ever competitors to MMDVM early on in this business? I was curious about that. So there are beginning to be some non-MMDVM hotspot options, and that's mostly what I'm here to talk about. I'll give a survey of what there has been, but sort of where things are going. And, you know, the thing about MMDVM is that a lot of the stuff is fairly old. The ADF 7021 was that recently was like end of life or something like that. I think I saw something about that. So there are newer chip options, and so Wojciech, did I pronounce it? Has designed a couple of new options. The CC1200 had, there's a picture of it there. That's really from very end of last year, beginning of this year, I guess. And there's also an SX1255 they're somewhat different chips in what they can do. The 1255 is like a full SDR and it's duplex and whatever, whereas the CC1200 can do, I don't know which modes exactly, but works for, what's that? FM only. And, so this is the hardware that's starting to become available, and if you're interested in one of these, you can order them on, right now, you have to order boards to be built from PCBWay, and if you order them with the right link, then the M17 Foundation will get a percentage of that, which would be, so make sure you do that if you're motivated to get one of these. So when you're, for most people using a hotspot, they like a nice packaged thing, and so there are low-level command line programs, and you can install those on the Raspberry Pi or whatever you're using as a host for this thing, and that will work fine, but you have to configure it all yourself and maintain it and that sort of thing. And there's no, if you do it that way, there's no UI other than, you can tail logs and that sort of thing. So some people have built some nice UIs with a bunch of information that handle both sort of telling you what the hotspot is doing, which is the gateway activity there on the lower right, and information about how it's configured and how it's running at the top, and then there's a whole set of configuration pages that let you set it up the way that you want to do it. And so for a lot of users, probably most users, they want the whole package, and that's what they do. So, as of the first half of this year, or beginning of the summer, what were the options available for hotspots? And there are a couple of sort of package distributions that, like what I showed on the previous slide. PyStar was the original one, and then WPSD. And there was also something called RPi Dashboard and RPi Interface, which, again, Wojciech had put together to run on the CC1200 and would give you a basic M17 hotspot functionality with those. And that was continuing to happen. Maybe I'll just pause here for a minute, and I'll tell how I got involved in this. At the same time, I got interested in M17, sort of looking for a software way to get involved. And one of the things that really interested me was M17 has this thing called packet mode, which, in addition to being able to send digital voice, you can send data. And in one sense, saying I have a phone that can send way more data way faster than M17 can, but my phone won't work everywhere. And also, I'm a ham and I like playing with things. So even though there's a better way to do it, the idea that I could take my radio and send text messages and maybe other things too sounded pretty interesting. And that was in the M17 specification, but nobody had done too much with it. And I said, well, this is something I can play with. And I wrote a couple of programs, first network-only clients that could talk to an M17 reflector and send text messages and receive them, that sort of thing. And then I said, well, I have this radio, that's what I really want it for. And so how could I get involved in that? And the MMDVM hotspots, like most of the rest of the ecosystem at that time, didn't do the packet mode. They could only do voice. So it's like, well, maybe I should work on trying to do something. And I didn't really want to deal with the MMBVM hardware and that whole ecosystem. So I said, I'll get a second CC1200 and see if I can. And actually, the one thing that did do packet mode at that time was RPI interface. So that was a way to get started with that. So just, that's sort of the background for me. These are the options that were, again, available for MMDVM as of the beginning of the summer and still are. PyStar and WPSD. And so PyStar, I think, was the original one, or certainly came before WPSD, which was a fork of PyStar, adding a bunch of functionality, changing the look. One of the things that Chip, the WPSD developer, did was moved to this continuous deployment model. So previously, you think of most software, when you want to upgrade it, you go look, see if there's an upgrade, and then you update the software on your device, and now it's running the new version, right? There's another approach that's this sort of continuous deployment where you push updates all the time. The developer does, and the advantage of that is you get things much more quickly. From the developer standpoint, it's not this big bang that they have to do. They can do small releases. If they break something, they just do another release immediately. As soon as somebody tells them it's broken, they fix it, or they back out the change that they made. And so it's a pretty attractive model, and that's the model that WPSD did, and they really went all in on that. So that because if you can turn off updates, but if you do, you get no updates. So not even like post file updates, post files are sort of the DNS of these digital voice modes, right? Things that map names to IP addresses, and so you sort of have to take updates, and if you do, then you get everything. So then came the 12th of July, and so I don't want to get too much into that. Most folk, the M17 folks, sort of know this stuff, and the folks who aren't, it won't be very interesting. But Jonathan G4KLX, who was the author of a lot of the software in the MMDVM suite, for various reasons, good and bad, mostly bad, removed M17 from MMDVM host, which is sort of the main sort of central program. And then a few days later, Chip removed M17 from WPSD, and with essentially no notice, which I think this gets less attention. I think that from my standpoint, as a sometime WPSD user, this was, you don't break user stuff in a major way without at least giving them some notice before they do it, and there was no reason he acted in that way, but he chose to. So the end result of that was, unless you happen to see he posted a notice on his Discord a few hours before he did it. If you didn't see that, you woke up in the morning and your hotspot no longer did M17. And also, in reaction to G4KLX's stuff, PyStar said that they were going to remove M17 as well, sort of in their next release, but their releases come months and months apart, so that didn't happen immediately. I'm not even sure if it's happened yet. I don't think it has. I looked recently and it looked like it was still there. So what's happened since then? At the time, people on the internet said it's the end of M17. And it's an interesting question. We sort of know, at least some of them, we sort of know what's happened over the last few months. but I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I don't know about anybody else here, but it was sort of an interesting question. So, it turns out it wasn't quite the end of M17. So, PyStar, again, I think continues to work, but presumably, unless they change their mind, we'll lose M17 support at some time. But there are a bunch of other options all of a sudden. So there's the WPSD M17 community for MSpot, OpenMT, which has an asterisk next to it because it's sort of coming soon. It's not yet released, but I got some information from the developer, and I'll talk about it a little bit. And ArcPy dashboard, the CC1200 hotspot installer, and M17 gateway form a much more user-friendly option than was available earlier. And the last bullet, those three things go together, and I think they need a better name for the whole combination. So if somebody's got suggestions, pass them along, because it's kind of a tongue twister right now. So the M17 community for, when this whole thing happened and the M17 support went away from WPSD, and people said, well, we probably should fork M7, one of the PyStar or WPSD, and there was various discussion went on. And then Michael, PK1MI, just went out and did it, which was good for him, right? So it's basically taking the version of WPSD immediately before M17 was removed and packaged that together, it's multi-mode, which most of the other options that I'm talking about that have come along are M17 only. So if you want to use DMR or DStar or something on your hotspot, really, at this point, WPSD is the fork is your option. It still has the auto-update functionality, but it's pointing at a different set of servers, so it's not the case that if it updates overnight, it'll remove M17, but you do get hotspot updates, and there's a capability of delivering bug fixes. It hasn't tried to keep pace with WPSD development. Michael has other things to do with his time. If there's somebody who's interested in that, again, talk to people here, because I think that'd be a great way to contribute to the community if it's something that interests you. Getting into maintaining that. So next option is MSpot. This is from Tom Harley and N7ADJ, who's the developer of a whole bunch of digital voice software, MRFD, which is the main reflector for M17, and he's worked on URF and a whole bunch of other things. He basically took the MMDVM software suite, sort of stripped it down to an M17 only thing, and made it just a nice, lightweight, easy to install and set up thing. It doesn't have a dashboard. So you do the configuration by hand, and you can control the hotspot with your radio. So if you want to change reflectors, you type that into your radio, the reflector you want to connect to, and it'll do that. So it supports MFD and URF reflectors, and there's the URL. ArcPy dashboard. So I mentioned that earlier. That was originally put together to work with with ArcPy interface for the CC1200. And again, Michael, DK1MI, said, you should do more with this. So he did. So he's added a whole bunch of functionality, and so it now, in addition to sort of the standard stuff showing recent calls and that sort of thing, it can also show text messages, which no other dashboard can do, because only M17 really does that. It can show a map of user locations, because again, M17, that's something that's happened another thing that's happened over the summer, sort of behind the scenes, is we've done some work on the GPS coordinate recording part of M17, so that can happen automatically if your radio has a GPS. You can set it up, enable that to transmit GPS coordinates of your location, and then the dashboard will show that on a map. You can see logs and status. You can do configuration and basic service control. The other thing that happened was that we switched the back end of that from RPI interface. Project has been pretty busy with other things, and so that was a great proof of concept. It was very helpful to me in getting going with M17 Gateway. But I'll talk about M17 Gateway in a minute. But that is now providing the back end functionality for the hotspot, and so there's the URL there. There's a picture. I thought about trying to do a live demo right here, but I'm not that brave, so we'll have to do this. But come on over. I've got a couple of hotspots set up over in the other room, and happy to show you things, on a radio, so you can see stuff live, see what happens. So the dashboard was nice, and there actually is some pretty good documentation on the Foundation wiki about how to install that, but it involved a bunch of command line stuff and whatever on a Raspberry Pi, so it wasn't exactly user-friendly. What do you know? Michael stepped up and said, we should have a better way to do this, and so we do. CC1200 Hotspot Installer is the software he put together. It's basically just a script. You download the script onto your Pi, just a new install on the Raspberry Pi with the CC1200 connected to it, and it will automate the entire installation and setup process. It does all those things, all the configuration, sets up the dashboard, even flashes the firmware, and it also has update functionality, so whenever you want to get newer versions of the software, you can just run it with choose the update option, and it will update things. So much easier to do than doing it by hand. So now we come to M17 Gateway, which is my contribution to this whole set of software. So it basically sits between the radio, in this case the CC1200 hat, and the internet reflectors, which are the things that allow your hotspot to connect to other people's hotspots and repeaters and all that sort of thing, and enable me on my handheld to talk to people all over the world using the internet as the in-between stuff. So it supports both the voice and packet modes. It does do the GNSS or GPS data It's written in Go. It's M17 only, so in contrast to the other, WPSD and PyStar, this won't do you any good if you want to do DMR or D-Star or something like that. It's not feature complete, so there are a bunch of things that you can do with an MMDVM hotspot. Right now you can't switch reflectors other than by changing configuration and restarting it, and stuff like that you can do from the radio, like info or echo or whatever, doesn't yet work, but I have a long to-do list. So I talked about this earlier, so I won't repeat it, but I do want to get back to like the packet mode stuff at some point. I have some ideas of neat things to do, services on the network that you could access from your radio, and I'd love to get back to doing some of that. So maybe if get to the right point, I can do that. So M17 Gateway, hardware-wise, was built for that CC1200 hat, but my sort of announcement for today is that it now also supports MMDVM hotspots. So if you have a hotspot that was running PyStar or WPSD and you want the dashboard functionality, it's M17 only, but you get that nice map and shows text messages, and will work with if your radio is set up to do text messaging, I'll talk about that a little more later on as to how we're doing that. But it's not in mainline OpenRTX yet, but hopefully it will be soon. But I can demo that in the other room if you want to see it. So you can now install M17 Gateway on your MMDVM hotspot instead of the other options, and you get that stuff. And that's definitely beta yet. It's got to get integrated into hopefully into the installer script, which I guess we'll have to rename because it'll no longer be CC1200 installer script at that point. But that should be there pretty quickly. I got this done last week and then was coming here, so I didn't get a chance to do the rest of it. I also hope to support the 1255 hat in the future. I haven't really looked at that, but that certainly is a goal. So, moving on to another option. So, it's called OpenMT, and the developer is Rick, KD0OSS. And it's a new multi-mode network replacement for the entire G4KLX suite. So, and Rick has done amazing stuff. I mentioned Michael earlier, but Rick is the person who has done the OpenRTX work to support packet mode and the GPS data recording and that kind of stuff. It's his fork of OpenRTX that I'm running on my radio in the other room, and you can see that does all that stuff. He has a PR in progress that will eventually get merged into mainline OpenRTX. But he basically decided, well, again, to some extent, I don't know if this may well have been in progress before July, but he saw, this monoculture and decided to do something about it. And so this is the result. There is a GitHub repo that doesn't have much in it yet. I'm talking about it. I basically know what's on the next couple of slides that he sent me, so I'll talk about what I think it means. But So this is sort of the architecture. So the top there is the machine that is the host, the hotspot. There's a modem there. That's still running basically the same firmware that all MMDVM hotspots do. So he's building on top of that. And I think he actually has already enhanced it to do packet mode, M17 packet mode. That's what I'm using to support M17 and M17 gateway, to support packet mode and M17 gateway. But I think he has plans to do more in that area. But so far it's running on top of that. He's got a host program, and then all the other services that manage different protocols are network services, so they can run on the same host, but they don't have to. So you could imagine having a separate computer or computers doing different things there. Instead of doing log scraping to get all the dashboard information and whatever, he's sort of doing it the right way with a SQL database and whatever. So that's, again, these are his slides. So, and this is more or less what I said, talking about the diagram. We got the host program that runs on the PC, and then these protocol and gateway services can run anywhere on the network. He's defining a protocol between all these things, so it'll be open for people to do things. And he's got he's also planning on building a dashboard, so this is the current state of it, I guess, that he sent me a picture of. So again, very exciting. It's not out yet, but he assures me that it will be soon. So anyway, that's basically it. But so what can we conclude from all this? First of all, I think it's safe to say M17 isn't dead. Instead, if anything, there's a lot more going on in this space than there was 6 months ago. So if anything, it's gone the other way. There are a lot of options. I don't think there's one best option right now. It all depends on what you want to do. And maybe it'll turn out that there's, in the end, maybe Rick's thing is better than all the rest, and the others will sort of wither away. But right now you have lots of things to choose from. And again, we're doing ham radio here, right? So it's fun to do things even if somebody else is already doing it, if you think you have a better way of doing it. If you didn't feel that way, then what do I need a handheld for? I have my phone, right? So that's the other point is open source works, and I think that's important. When people were saying, I saw, again, people on the internet saying, right after the announcement that M17 was being removed, well, this is terrible that open source, that people can just remove stuff. And it's like, well, if it were commercial software, what would happen if they decided to remove it? You'd either not have it at all, or you'd be stuck running an old version forever, and when it no longer ran on the operating system you wanted to run, then you'd be out of luck. So it's much better that Michael can take WBSD and fork it and keep it running, and people can do other things with other pieces of the software and do it. And there's still lots of opportunities to do more with this stuff, and you'll hear other things this weekend. But just in this space, there's certainly I welcome software contributions in the stuff I work on, or I'm sure the other projects would too. But it's not only that. Documentation is an area entrepreneurship, you know, right now that CC 1200 board you can get from PCBWay, but it's kind of expensive. You have to order at least 5 circuit boards, and you don't have to have them all populated, but it feels like kind of a waste when you don't. And, you know, so to cost that up, if someone wanted to put together group buys or multiple someones in different regions, because it probably would make sense to, you know, do it with people who are close to you, that would be, you know, that'd be a real service to people in the community. And there are a bunch of other things I'm surely not thinking of, but get involved. People, you know, it's fun and a lot of great people. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.